Welcome back to the Everything Property Podcast. Now we know for sophisticated investors, commercial is a space plenty of people love to play. Today's guest has spent more than 2 decades in the space working for industry juggernauts across southwest Sydney, and now he's building his own. You may have seen his face across social media, but in case you haven't, Dan O'Brien from X Commercial, welcome to the Everything Property Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me on, Dave.
That's all right, man. Good to finally get you on. I know you just had a kid. Your family had a kid, so congratulations. Welcome to the podcast. Good to have you on finally. Meet the guy in the flesh that I see on my social media every single day. I want to jump in today, because you're the commercial guy, I want to jump into both leases and contracts. Mm-hmm. But before that, tell me what a high school teacher would have described Dan O'Brien as. Your high school teacher, what they would have described Dan O'Brien as.
Bit of a larrikin.
Yeah, okay.
Who, when he applies himself, does pretty well, but didn't often apply himself.
Okay, and I think I know how the story goes, but you weren't particularly a university guy?
Yeah, I went to university, keep mum and dad happy, and it took me 4 years to finish 3 months worth of subjects. So I said, this is enough. I want to go and earn some money now.
Yeah, okay. And what was you started in resi, why real estate?
I had an accident at the time, and I was just bumming around when I was at uni, and then I thought, really love real estate. The guy in my suburb where I grew up was a young bloke driving a flash car and flash suits, and I just thought, I want to be like this guy when I grow up, you know? Yeah. He was earning lots of money and driving the big Porsche Cayenne, and I thought, mate, sign me up. So I actually went and door knocked him and said, literally, I want to be like you when I grow up. What do I have to do? And he said, well, how about you go and ring 100 people a day? So that's what I did. Really? So I was his lead generator. Yeah.
What agent can you name the agent? Or
yeah, it was Daniel. It was a guy called Daniel Gavin at a suburb called Mortdale, and I think he's got 2 or 3 offices in the St George area now.
Okay, and how did that play out? Working
that
in
was
resi
good.
And doing all the phone
yeah,
work?
I did it for about 3 months, just a telephone terrorist for him, and then he was taking me out on appointments and open houses, and then from that I progressed quickly to a sales role. But I was 24, 25, selling pretty modest houses. I think the highest house I sold was 800 grand.
Wow, back in the day.
Back in the day, yeah, which was the early 2000s.
Decent money, decent price. What about your transition from resi to commercial? Why and how did that come about?
It came about because I looked long term and didn't like the idea of working weekends. So I thought, what else can I sell? And then I met a guy, my first boss, Josh Charles, who was working at CBRE at the time. And I said, I sold some units for him, investment properties. Mm-hmm. And I said, mate, can I have a job with you? And he's like, oh, yeah, whatever. And then I just hounded him for a long time and got a job eventually with him. And he put me on 28,000 a year.
28?
Yeah. And a 5 times multiple before I got commission. So,
what's 5 times multiple?
So you have to write 5 times your salary before you get paid any commission.
Really?
Yeah. So that was a bit of a stitch up.
Wow.
But
okay.
I was happy, and I did a few good. I started well, and I really loved CBRE when I was there.
You were there for 9 years?
Yep.
And what was the highlights of that?
Oh, highlights just people you meet, like other guys in the firm who I'm still mates with now. So. Yeah, it was just a really, really different culture back then, boisterous and a bit of a men's club, and it was. I liked it though, but it was fun, real fun.
All right, and then you make a small transition to Knight Frank. Apparently, they make you some sort of promise.
Made me a promise to open an office, which they didn't fulfil.
Yep.
So I gave them 12 months to start that office, and then 18 months later, they still hadn't started it. So I said, all right, I'm out. I'm going to start my own office.
Do you think that's because Knight Frank's sort of like this big sort of conglomerate and the cogs turned a bit slower, they reneged on the decision, or what?
Well, actually, when I resigned, this Australian CEO didn't know about the promise the New South Wales CEO made me. So he's like, I'm really sorry, Dan, I had no idea. I wasn't told. Oh. I'm like, yeah, well, see ya. So, but again, I've got some really good friends still at Knight Frank, and that's the beauty about this industry, especially commercial. When I was in resi, I used to hate the competitors and in that suburb or whatever, it's real territorial.
Yeah.
Commercial's the absolute opposite, and it took me a long time to adjust to that.
Between commercial agents?
Yeah, well, like we're all friendly. We collaborate. I mean, we're not like, some more friendly than others, but generally we collaborate. If I have a tenant in commercial or a buyer, I can show them any other agent's stock, which is really a major differentiator between a resi agent and a commercial agent.
How does that commission get split then?
Well, you go 50-50 or sometimes 75-25 in the deal doer's favour.
Yeah.
So, if you're a resi, can you imagine if you work at, I don't know, Ray White, you could go and sell every listing that McGrath has. Like, if you have the buyer, it's a really different mindset.
Interesting. What are some of the highlights of the bigger deals you did sort of at that 9 years at CBRE? Because they've got the name, they've got the pull power, especially in that commercial space. So you must have been, and you're South Sydney.
Yep.
So you're like,
that was when it was all gentrifying. They
Mascot, Botany.
All the warehouses being bowled over, apartments going on.
Yeah.
Like a great deal was a guy called Colin Walters who built all of East Village at Zetland. Walt Corp, he built most of those units there. He had a 200 grand option on a site in Rosebery that he optioned for 14 mil, and he had 2 years, and he put 200 grand down, and it was a government sale.
Yeah.
And I rolled in there and said, I was appointed on the leasing, and I said, look, this is going to be tough to lease this thing. How about you sell it?
What was there previously?
It was an RTA, like roads, the old, it's called RMS now, but it was like driver thing where you used to go and get your driver license.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a big tower, 7,000 metre tower, and like 2 hectares of land in the middle of Rosebery.
Yeah.
And I had a church group who needed 2 hectares to build a big church. So I said to Colin, would you sell it?
He's paid 200 grand.
He's paid 200 grand for 2 years. This is a year in.
To buy it for
14 at the end of the 2 years.
Yeah.
So I've rolled in. I didn't know he had an option on it, number one, and I didn't know he had 14 on it either. Yeah. So I said, I've got this church group. I'm not. And he goes, I'm not selling. Not interested, Dan. So I asked him twice. Third time I asked him, I said, pick a number, and he goes 30 mil, and I said, okay, and I got him 29.75. And
DA approved or not? Nothing?
Nah, raw.
Oh.
And when the lawyers were doing the contract, because I hadn't done one of these before, I didn't know when they were saying, we're just going to nominate the church straight into the contract so Colin doesn't pay stamp duty or anything like this. And I was like, yeah, whatever, just get it done. And anyway, they exchanged it, and I didn't understand, because I was used to selling like 1 and 2 bedroom units for 100 grand. Told me about 2 weeks later, he said, do you know what, I actually paid 200 grand for that site. I didn't pay 14. 14 was on the contract.
This is the power of call options.
Oh, so he just got his 16 from the church. He gave 14 to Landcom, and bang, exchange and settle same day.
Oh,
yeah, and I was I just had no idea. I charged him 1%, and I could have charged him 10%.
That's crazy.
That was my first one.
Okay,
so I started well.
Anything else that sticks out? Any ones like that?
There was a lot of deals, of course, over 9 years. Like,
you'd hope so.
Yeah. Oh, I did one in Caringbah for Coles, actually. Coles said to me, there's a site in Caringbah, which was a Coles, existing Coles shopping centre, supermarket. And then next to it was a little arcade, one of those old 1950s shopping arcades, 12 different owners, company title. They said, Dan, can you go and buy that for us? At no point can those vendors know who we are. We're not Coles. They set up a little shelf company. And I said, okay. So they retained me. So I was acting for Coles. But it took 2 years to get all the 12 owners together. In that time, 2 of the 12 owners passed away. So I had to talk to the families and the kids as well.
Probate and
it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. So we eventually got it together, and it was about 12 mil. That was a really strategic site for Coles. I said, what's your budget? And they said, we don't have one. Just get it.
Wow.
I was like, all right, cool. And that's kind of fun when you don't have a budget. You're like, I said to every owner, pick a number, right? Yeah. And it's all these little 80 square metre, shitty little retail things they got leased to nail salons and sushi bars and paying them 20 grand a year or whatever. And so that was another good one. That was probably one of my hardest. That was one of my hardest
to stitch
deals.
Together. It's 2 years. I hope you got paid well for it.
Yeah, I got 2%. So 240 grand. But then you have to give half to the company, half to the tax man, and at the end of the day, if you work it out on an hourly rate, it's probably go and wash cars,
Oh,
so it's not that glamorous.
Don't say that. But all right, so you do that little stint at Knight Frank, and then LJ Hooker, let's sort of quickly dive into that, so then we can talk about X.
Yeah, so look, I just left the big firm and didn't know. I'm not a marketing guy. I don't know. I mean, I know how to write an IM, but I don't know how to put one together.
Mm-hmm.
So I just went to a franchise, and they actually approached me and said, "We'll give you all the templates and all the marketing and the CRM." And they go, "We'll charge you 9% of your turnover." I'm like, "Yeah, okay. Well, I'm turning over nothing, so that's okay."
9%.
So I did a 5-year deal with Hookers, and then look, I just got no value from that at the end of it. So I built up a pretty good business. We bought a second office during that 5 years. Actually bought a third one, settled the day I left LJ Hooker and started X. So I opened my third office when we launched X in the second lockdown of COVID in July 2022, I think.
Wow. Is there any non-competes or anything with areas for commercial?
No, because my franchise agreement had ended.
Okay.
So unless they sign me up, I'm free to do whatever I want.
Okay, and then why X commercial? Where are we at? Like, what's the plan? Tell me.
So, look, it came about. I was at a barbecue with my co-founder Alex Bennett, and we were just thinking like we could do something better than what's around.
Was he LJ Hooker with you?
He was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he came out of uni and worked with me, and we're still very close. And we're just thinking we can do something better and design something for commercial agents, because we looked at the franchise brands that are out there and the independent brands that are out there. And we just thought, there's a gap there where all the big firms are at the top, if you like, of the market. Then there's, I think, in that second tier space, there's really no one doing everything very well.
Daylight.
Yep. And then there's, on rung 3 of that ladder, there's all your independents and your franchise businesses just scrapping it out against each other, trying to pull talent out of the big firms and struggling. Yeah. Right? Struggling to do that. So we thought if we could be like the Macquarie Bank of banking for real estate and commercial, and attack that second tier space where we're sitting under the big guys and we can move faster, we can be more nimble, we can do creative marketing like what we're doing, we should be able to pull talent out of the big firms, because we can pay much better commission rates than the guys in the big firms. Yeah, much better.
Don't have the big overheads.
Don't have the overheads, don't have the politics, don't have the red tape, none of that. You come on, get 60, 70% of what you write if you're a big fee writer, and away you go. Okay. And the most you get at these big firms, the most you get is a 50-50 split, but that's after you do 2.5 million in fees. The first couple of mil is 35, 37, 40, 42% commissions. And it's after tax, that's another reason I left, because it's kind of deflating.
Yeah, okay, dwindles back. Yeah. How successful, I mean, I know you've been going at it for a year now, we said previously, but how much has that marketing, in particular, your social media, your videos, how much has that helped with X, bringing on talent, that kind of stuff?
It's helped a lot. It's been quite transformational and really surprising. Like, I thought it was...
A bit scary.
Oh, man, massively. Like, I didn't do it for many years because I thought no one's doing it, so it mustn't work. But because no one's doing it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means no one's got the balls to have a crack and do it.
Yeah, okay.
And the guys from Melbourne, our franchise office down there, or the guys who... So we started a new franchise in Melbourne, and those guys were running their own business for 12 years, being extremely successful.
Under a brand?
No, under their own. Their own boutique agency, And they came up to Sydney and said, "We love what you're doing. Tell us about your plans." And I did, and they said, "Mate, let's be part of it. Can we have a franchise in Victoria?" And we're like, "Absolutely, let's go."
Wow.
So we want to grow, and I've had approaches from all, like, different countries. Like, we're about to do a deal in a different country for an office, ex-commercial office, right? Yeah. Which will happen in Q1 next year.
Okay.
Like,
is it southeast of Australia, or what way is it?
Southeast.
Is it NZ?
I can't say, but it's really cool.
You're not going to give me, if you're not going to give me exclusive, that's fine.
I'll tell you after we turn it off.
Okay.
But these people are coming because of Instagram.
Wow.
And there's no way I would have met these people without that. And it's really amazing. And we're winning jobs because of it. Like, I'm getting called into a lot of, "Mate, I've seen you. I feel like I know you. Can you sell Mum's place?" or
100%.
And
that's
and
even
so
with now.
good.
Yeah, I feel like I know this guy. I've been watching this guy for so long. Like when you come in, he's the exact same person that you probably get a read off on the socials, and it's just. But it also allows you to put your brand out there, who you are, so people know what they're getting. I think what reads really well with you is authenticity. What I see is like you're not like this really flashy, flamboyant agent like with, I don't know what car you drive, but like with the Ferrari and stuff, it's just like honest, straight to the point, like, no fluff about it.
Yep.
And I feel like that's incredible with the power of social media.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I really don't like doing it though. I feel uncomfortable. I hate hearing myself. I hate looking at myself.
Yeah.
I still don't enjoy it.
Yeah, okay. So you go ahead and jump on Everything Property podcast and...
Yeah, well, I'm flattered to be asked, But, I mean, I'm trying to get other people in the business to take more of that airtime away from me because I want to share that with everyone.
Yeah, because you've got, I think as well, what I found interesting, I picked up in a couple of your videos, is your sort of mentality around leadership and growing other people. A lot of people go out wanting to take, cash, be big, successful. But talk to me sort of about how you see leadership, how you've sort of structured X-Commercial.
Well, I called it X-Commercial because that's very generic and it's not about me.
Yeah.
And the people that we bring into the X-Commercial Club, these other owners, business owners that we're going to get come in, we're going to sit around a table once a quarter and have a scotch and a cigar and go, right, where are we going next? How can we improve? Yeah. What are you doing that I'm not? Not about me at all. It's about sharing, growing, being innovative, and how can I help you and how can you help me? And how can we dominate together? Dominate in our own markets or our own states together. What help do you need?
Yeah.
Like I'm talking to guys in a different state now, and they said to me the other day, we haven't signed them up yet, but they said to me, Dan, we're not talking to anyone else. We're coming down next week. You have been incredible with your support, and we haven't even signed with you yet. And I'm already bringing them deals, sending them people to hire. Like I'm genuinely helping.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you get it back 10 times.
Give without the expectation.
That's it.
Of
like
receiving.
What you're doing, right?
Yeah, fair.
Gary V,
Yeah.
Just value, you'll get it back.
Okay. And did you see that work in like CBRE early days, or that's just how you were brought up, family, or just that's how you want to do it?
I think that's just the right way. That's the right thing to do.
Okay, so you just went, this is how I want to run it.
Yeah. So those big firms are very, very territorial and they're very closed. They're not abundance. They're scarcity mindset, and that's different. Yeah. So if you get we've got an open database, so anyone in any office can see who I'm talking to, and I can see who they're talking to.
Yeah. And
in franchise groups, that's complete madness.
Yeah.
Every little office has got their own database, and the guy in the next suburb's got his.
Yeah,
and they don't talk to each other. It's just illogical.
So how does that work with calling the same guy up, 3 people from the office then?
Well, you don't, because you get into you see the guy and you can see the notes. Daniel spoke to him 3 months ago. Okay, well that agent would then ring me and say, hey, this guy's got a building. Do you want to work on it together?
Yeah, okay.
Or I got a tip he's selling. Yep. You know him. Can we do it together? Sure, let's do it.
You get the deal done at the end of the day.
Yeah, so it's sharing, and it's 2 agents on every listing. And it's the mentality that what it goes around comes around, and if I take you on something, I know you're going to take me on something eventually.
I think there's a lesson in that for a lot of people.
It's difficult when there's money involved, though, Dave. You've got to be vigilant, really. But it comes from the top down.
Comes from the top down, but what about what do you look for when you're hiring?
Things you can't teach. So drive, ambition, work ethic.
Yeah.
I've started asking people, what's the last podcast or book you've read?
Yeah.
Right, on personal development. And
everything property, huh?
Everything property should be the first one.
Yeah.
So, you look for those things you can't teach. Because you can teach the bones to the terms to anyone.
But how do you pick that up in an interview, right?
Oh, you can tell.
You can tell?
Yep.
You got a good read?
Yep.
Okay.
You ask them, and then if we don't have a good read, we'll get them psych tested. Mm-hmm. If they're coming for a sales job, I need to see if they're a hunter or if they're a gatherer.
Yep. Right?
If you're a gatherer, you can be a property manager. If you're a hunter, you can be a sales guy. So we have, we get them psych tested for that. So
Wow.
that's good. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I like that. Well, look, what I want to do is, while I have you in here and whilst we can bring some value for the audience in terms of setting up and running ex-commercial, you're a guy that would be looking at sales contracts and maybe leases as well a lot more than the average residential or the average commercial investor. So I want to talk to a little bit about what are the top clauses in leases or sales contracts that either we can explain and run through or that are hairy and that we have to look out for.
Sales are pretty vanilla.
Yep.
Price, deposit, settlement, that's about it. Okay.
Leases then.
Leases. So if
I'm buying them, I need to lease next. So
leases are really important. Options are extremely important, and I'll talk about those in a sec. But the main things are your start date, your lease term, your annual increases, your make good. So when the tenant leaves, they've got to strip everything out and give it back to you the way you gave it to them.
Okay.
That's important, and owners can get tripped up on that if they're not on the ball. Bank guarantee, which is like your security.
But with make good clauses, if someone's going to come into that commercial property and spend $500,000 on a fit out, do I have it? Can I put in an option to keep that?
You can negotiate anything.
Okay.
Yeah, as an owner, you mean?
Yeah, as an owner. Yeah.
You can.
Because
or even better, you can say to them, this is going to cost $250,000 for you to strip out.
Yep.
I want you to strip it out. But if you give me $200,000, I'll keep it. So you keep it, and the next tenant walks in, and he might use it.
That's a thing.
That's a thing.
Oh my gosh.
Yep, that is a thing. That is a thing for sophisticated owners. It's a make good settlement, and the tenant goes, you know what?
A make good settlement. That's quality.
You know what? I don't want to spend all the trades and get them in here and strip all this out. You know what? I'll give you 200, or I'll give you 150, and the owner goes, thanks, puts it in his pocket, and the next tenant walks in and goes, this is beautiful, fit out great. There you go.
Pay more rent too because they got.
But when that tenant, the second tenant comes in, when they leave, they have to take it away if the owner doesn't want it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
Okay. Talk to me about bank guarantees versus personal guarantees.
So, security is three things: bank guarantee, personal guarantee, or director's guarantees.
Yep.
Director's guarantees are normally not worth the paper they're written on because you set up a shelf company and you go, I'm director of that. Right.
Yep.
You can burn it. Personal guarantees. Some owners ask for those, some don't. Some tenants agree to them, most don't. But you got to put it in there. Personal guarantees, you can go after their house. You can go after, if they don't pay the rent, you can make sure you get that rent.
Yeah. Okay.
Bank guarantee is it's a deposit, but it's a document from the bank that says this person has this money in an account that is quarantined from everything else. That money sits in that account for the term of the lease, and the owner can go back and claim that at the end of the lease if they don't make good properly.
If they don't make good or if they don't pay the rent?
Both.
Okay. And what is the typical bank guarantee duration on comparison to the size of the rent? So, for example, if it's a 3-year lease term, what's the size of the bank term versus if it's 5-year or 10-year?
The term is nearly irrelevant.
Yep.
It's always 3 or 6 months.
Okay.
Bank guarantee in rent.
Okay.
Gross rent plus GST.
Perfect.
Yep.
And increases, ratchets, CPI, caps, cap and collars. What do we run through this for me, man? This is another language.
So a normal thing is a fixed increase, fixed percentage. Normally it's 3, 4, or 5%. So every year at the anniversary of your lease, your rent ticks up 3, 4, or 5%, whatever you negotiate. So when your lease runs out and you have an option. So the lease is ended, you've got a 5-year option. Yep. Do you trigger that option? Yes. Okay. Normally your rent goes up. Either it's a market review or it's a fixed increase. Now, if it's a market review, they can say, I want to put a cap of 10% and a collar of 5% on it.
So collar's the minimum?
Collar's the minimum.
Okay.
Yep. And the collar's like a ratchet clause. It's the same thing.
Okay.
So ratchet is, if you can imagine a ratchet, it goes up and it just stops at that level. It's not going below that.
And what about options on leases? Are they can be applicable or they can be...
It's always in the tenant's favour. So if you're an owner, try to avoid giving them out.
So they don't really mean anything, really?
Well, they can sometimes be worse for an owner.
Why?
Because at the end of the term, the tenant's got to pack all their stuff, strip everything out, and leave.
Yeah.
If they've got an option and they trigger that option, they just stay where they are, which is fine. But for a tenant to have that hanging over their head, like we've got to leave. If I can't do a deal here with this guy to extend my lease, I've got to go. I've got to pack everything up, clean everything out. That's quite a big thing for a tenant to do.
Okay.
So tenants always ask for options, or they always should.
But it's their decision to...
It's the tenant's decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're not really in favour of the landlord. Interesting.
I've seen an owner...
Tell me the story. Tell me the stories. I know you got them Dan. Tell me the stories.
So there's a guy has a shop. He's got a bunch of shops, and one shop he gave a 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 year lease, and he goes, "I've got a 12-year lease." I said, "Mate, you don't. You've got a 2-year lease, and you're giving him 6 options." The funny thing was that is actually a development site. Now that tenant is just sitting there every 2 years. He's got the right to stay. So that guy can't sell that property for 12 years. He can't sell it because that one tenant is there.
You can't kick him out like Resi?
You could go on, no, you can't. You could buy him out. But can you imagine the tenant's power with that? The tenant's like, okay, you got a big basket of money? Yeah, I want whatever.
Okay.
I'm not going.
So there's no grounds removals in commercial?
No, not if they're paying their rent.
Okay. What is that process of, obviously I don't have a commercial property, but what's that process when... Because it's not as if you're going to a tribunal like you are in Resi.
No, it's the exact opposite. It's called court.
Court. So is it straight to court,
yep.
or like you can go and lock the premises? Like what am I?
It's quite brutal. So if you're late 14 days,
yep.
you get a 7-day breach notice, and then after that, they can essentially just lock the property manager.
3 weeks.
Yep, that's it.
Lock it with your new key.
Let him in. That's it. You're not in.
What happens to the contents?
The owner keeps them.
You keep everything.
Yep.
If they don't pay in 3 weeks.
Yep. Unless they put themselves into liquidation and the receivers go in and keep all the stuff.
Okay, and that's okay.
Yep.
Interesting. Any stories around that you've seen?
Look, not really, but from 14 days, if you're late 14 days in your rent, you get charged 15%.
Okay, surcharge on top.
Yep. So most tenants prefer not to do that.
What's some of the hairy clauses then, if we're looking at leases?
Hairy in terms of there are things called demolition clauses.
Yep.
And generally in Sydney now, most owners put demolition clauses in because they always want the right, if a developer comes and offers them stupid money, to go and get rid of the tenants. So if it's a 10-year lease, most leases will have a demo clause after year 6.
Okay.
In Sydney.
And that means what is the trigger for a demo clause though?
The owner?
Yeah.
Just if he feels like it.
Does it need to be demolished?
They need to put a DA in, I think.
Okay.
I think that's the trigger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's a DA lodge. No, it's not even we're coming to knock the thing down with bulldozers.
This is happening. There's your 12 months notice.
Wow.
Pack your shit in 12 months and get out.
What about the other ones we got here?
What else have we got? So what we've done to sometimes what owners do to get, if you do a 10-year deal and you want a demolition clause in at the start of year 6, some owners will say, listen, if I trigger that, I know I'm putting you out. Here's 6 months rent as cash for your next one. Okay. So a bit of a sweetener.
Incentive.
That's called a back-ended incentive.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. So the other hairy clauses are things like, well, they're not hairy, but I mean, if you're expanding your business and you take a floor of a building, you can get a first right of refusal over the next piece of property that comes available in that asset.
Yep.
Incentives are worth talking about.
Fit outs and incentives.
Yeah. So your incentive is either a cash contribution, which generally private investors don't like to give, but guys like Goodman or Dexus, they will. And generally in Sydney, office incentives now in Sydney are 40%
of the total
of the total rent.
What?
Yeah, it's mad. So because
is it okay? This is for office assets only, right?
Office. Yep, office buildings. Yeah.
Wow.
So you've got to give. Let's say it's $1 million a year. You give $400,000 to the tenant as an incentive.
How is that even feasible then?
For the owners?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. Yep, real tough.
Are people requesting 40%? Like for an office?
Yeah. Well, so before COVID, they were 15 to 20%.
And
now
after
they're 40. It's because everyone's left.
Yeah.
But it's like a tide. So CBD vacancy was huge.
Yeah.
Everyone moved out to North Sydney, Chatswood or South Sydney because the rents were too high. Okay, rents in the city go down, the tide comes back in.
Yeah.
All of those markets, North Sydney's got 40% vacancy now. Chatswood's the same. All the tenants are moving back into the city because the rents have come down to a reasonable level. Then when the rents go up, they'll just expand again.
And what stage are we now? Everyone's still on the outer peripheries?
Everyone's, yeah, essentially, yeah.
When and why do we start moving back in?
Well, I think, what's happening, so there's a few developers like Gurner, he bought an office building, he's going to turn it into resi. There's going to be more of that.
Yep.
There's going to be a lot more of that, I think. And I think to keep pace with the other global cities, we need to do that. Like
convert the office buildings, you reckon?
Yeah. Well, I probably shouldn't be saying this as a commercial guy, but I think
True.
I really think that we need to. New York's got like resi above commercial, and London has as well. I think we need to bring people into the city to activate it at night.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's my hope anyway.
But your issue there, I think, as well, is the councils and the government in terms of this 24-hour nightlife. Like, if they're not supportive of that and pushing that forward, then you can have all the residents you want in there. But it's like, the worst thing about Sydney, I think, is that, like, all the shops close at, like, 5 p.m. Whereas, like, you go over to those thingos and, like, you can still go to a clothing store at 7, 8 p.m. at night. Yeah. It just makes sense. You're working 9 to 5. How am I getting to the clothing store?
That's right.
Outside of that. So we need to start at, like, 7. Yeah, have a little gap during the day, but, like, you need to go back past that 5 p.m.
Well, you're talking about the supply as well. Like, the supply is terrible at the moment, and we need to address that really quickly.
What about in commercial though? In the like resi, obviously we need to build more homes, but like industrial offices, where do you see in Sydney and that South Sydney band? Like, do we need more industrial? Is there too much vacancies, or like how does the market sort of sit in that space?
So a year ago, vacancy in Sydney for industrial was less than 1%. So it's really super tight. It's gotten a lot. It's increased now. But there's been no real commercial development done in Sydney because you need a pre-commitment, which is basically a tenant to come along and say, if there's a 10,000 metre office building, you need 8,000 or 9,000 metres of that committed, lease signed by a tenant before the banks will give them funding to build it. So that's why there hasn't been much building going on for commercial. So
you're talking CBD too.
CBD and fringe, South Sydney, like 5K ring around the city. There hasn't been much commercial development going on because price is too high for steel and construction. And unless you get a full building tenant to take things out, which they've had in Parramatta quite a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of those government type uses are going out there.
Still pushing.
They can pre-commit out there.
Yeah.
And rents are half of what they are in the CBD. And generally, most of the staff live out there anyway. So it saves them a 40-minute train ride into the city. So for those departments, I've got a really rosy view on Parramatta. I mean, it's quite tough at the moment, but it'll be bigger than the Sydney CBD, I think, in 10 years.
Why?
It's the geographical centre of New South Wales, of Sydney Metro, really. Yeah,
I mean, correct, but like, it's just not. I'm just not seeing that movement, even in the resi space either. Yeah.
Well, look, I think it will be.
We'll pull this up in 2034, shall we?
If we're still here, yeah.
Well, you guys open as well an office in Padstow?
Yes,
Padstow.
Southwest Sydney, yeah.
How's that market out there?
It's good. It's mainly industrial.
You're in a good little spot just off the M5, huh?
Yeah, you saw the big sign there. Thank you, Dave.
You can't miss it, man. Yeah.
I said I want the biggest sign that lights up at night. It's like the Batman sign. So, I mean, that's good. Like that's South Sydney 10 years ago. So we just go down the M5, 10 minutes, and you're at Padstow or Revesby, and they're building industrial there, and they're selling them for reasonable prices now.
What sort of yields you getting out there?
Same, 5% industrial, 5-6%.
6?
Yeah.
Shit. Okay.
Yeah, well, like that's smaller, sub 10 mil.
Yeah, of course, but still 5-6 mil in Sydney's pretty good.
5-6%, you mean?
Yeah. 5 to 6% yield. Sorry, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. What's some of the deals that come to mind that are memorable that you've done over the years that sort of either stuck with you or you've learnt some big lessons on?
I think I've spoken about one of them before, but it was when a guy called Mike Williams made 40 mil in 6 months, and he just listened to the advice I gave him, which was really refreshing.
Yeah.
Right? Because everyone thinks you're an agent, you're trying to stitch me up, whatever. But yeah, it was a 5-lot. It was 4 buildings on 5 separate lots in Alexandria, and he paid 22 mil, which was 2 million more than the owner actually wanted. Mm-hmm. So that was a good deal for the owner.
Option or cash?
No, straight cash.
Wow.
But during the campaign, I had a lot of buyers, owner occupiers, come to me and say, "I want that first building, or I want that second building, or I want that third block of land." Mm. And I said, "I've got to sell the whole thing." And they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, if someone buys it and chops it up and sells it, can you come back to me?"
Yeah.
So I was like, "Yeah, okay. How much would you pay for that?" So I got an offer on the first one for 11. I got an offer in the middle of 4.5. I got $29 million worth of offers in writing.
Yeah.
Before we sold the big site.
Yeah.
So I know Mike, and I said, "Mike, I've got a deal for you. Here's 5 offers, 29 million in sales. You got to pay me 22 for that, but you get a building in the middle for free. So 4 of the 5 lots."
Yeah. So he cut it back up instead of selling it for a super site.
Yep. He bought the super site.
Yeah.
Sold the 4 off. Kept the one in the middle, which was a 2,000 metre warehouse. Oh. Got his 7 mil. Renovated the warehouse with the 7 mil.
Yep.
Put Camilla Franks in there, which is the ladies' fashion user for 10 years.
Yep.
Bang. That's worth 40 mil.
Wow.
Yeah. And we did that in 6 months.
Shit.
So that was a good one.
Any more like that? It's more that South Sydney belt, right? That like Mascot, Alexandria, Botany, those areas where you can stitch up the best deals.
Once every 5 years you get a deal like that. Okay. The other one was the rugby club at Coogee. That was another one. Randwick Rugby Club went into receivership. Yeah. And we sold that, and we had to sell it. We did an EOI, and we got all these offers, but the highest offer was 3.25. And it was an 1,800 square metre strata in Coogee with 50 cars. But it was basement, so it wasn't like ground floor. It was, it might have been ground floor, I forget. Yeah, it was ground floor and then basement. And everyone was looking at it going, I don't really know what to do here. And I said, I know Woolies are looking, and I know IGA are looking for a supermarket.
Yeah. How much GFA? How much?
1,800.
Okay.
Yeah. So I took Woolies and IGA through as we're doing the sale campaign. And they're like, well, whoever buys it, here's a lease offer. $1 million a year net.
On 1,800?
Yeah.
Was that a metro? That's pretty small.
It's a Dan Murphy's now, actually, in Coogee, opposite Coogee
it's
Oval.
The one behind it.
Yeah, opposite Coogee Oval there.
Wow.
So these developers, who don't call me anymore, Mark and Tony, if you're around, give me a ring. No, they stopped ringing me. But anyway, they bought this site for $3.25 million. Exchanged on it. Before they settled, I had an agreement for lease for Woolies for $1 million a year rent. Do that at 5% net. That's a $20 million. That's worth $20 million. They paid 3.25.
Did they resell it?
No, they still own it. And I've asked them to manage it, and they won't call me back. Wow. I don't know what more I have to do.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah, 5% increases. It was a 15-year lease.
That's
to Woolies.
That's unbelievable.
I know.
3.2 sounds way too cheap for that space.
I know. Well, we ran a campaign. This was 2014 or 2015.
Okay, fuck. Makes sense going back that far.
Yeah.
I'm thinking a couple of years ago, but like 10 years ago. Still.
But also in 2014, it went from 3.25 to 20 mil. Bang. Before settlement. Absolutely. I'm like, guys, you owe me whatever next to your building. I want first look at it. They're like, yeah, no worries. Mate, no phone call. Anyway. Move on.
Talk to me about relationships, because that's like your number one game, right? What do you think the top skill that you need to be successful as a commercial agent?
In building relationships? Yeah, you need to follow up. You need to do what you say you're going to do. You need to always act for your client. I think that's it. It's pretty simple. Yeah. Just look after them like they're a family member, and you won't go wrong.
Okay. Yeah, interesting.
And always maximise the price. A lot of agents are lazy, and a lot of agents are order takers. And if I think someone's got another $1,000, I'll get it. Because if you want 1,000 on the pokies, you'd be happy. So Some of my sales numbers are weird. They're like 3,227,000.
You the shark.
Do you know what I mean? You just got to push that little bit more.
You smell a little bit of blood and you're going in for more.
Well, just always ask, because if you don't ask, you don't get.
Okay. And what's the plans? What's the growth and expansion plans for X Commercial moving forward?
Well, we're franchising.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'd like to be in 6 offices in Queensland, 6 or 8 in Victoria.
Do you have areas in Queensland or just?
Yeah, we've split the map. Southeast Queensland, Gold Coast, Brisbane, Sunny Coast, Toowoomba.
Mm-hmm. Toowoomba?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, that's, maybe that's just top of mind because I'm talking to someone. But Sydney will have 10 offices in Metro Sydney. And then I'd like...
How many you got now?
5, about to be 6.
Wow.
Yep. 6 Q1 next year. And then, so I'll have 6, but I want 10. So the other markets we want to be in is Parramatta, Liverpool, Manly, Northern Beaches, St George and Sutherland Shire. There, and then that's it. There's our 10. There's our 10 offices with the 6 we've got.
Okay.
Or 5 we've got, sorry. We'll have 6 early next year. And then I'd like to have on Newcastle, Coffs. Not Coffs, sorry. Yeah, well, Newcastle, maybe Newcastle Central Coast. And then Wollongong, maybe.
Yep.
And then, one in Perth. You never know. And...
Is that what's end game? What's the
We just want a national network of good quality people who are business owners who share intel and share resources for the common good. That's it. And we want to be a real option for recruiting agents who are disillusioned in the big firms, and there's a lot of them.
Okay. So the guys that are performing well but probably aren't getting the cash that
they're not getting the splits they deserve. Yeah. Yeah.
Not a little sales plug, but a bit of a sales plug, I suppose.
I can't help myself.
If the boys are listening or the girls are listening, that's
give me a ring.
Yeah. We'll drop his phone number in the show notes. But look, that's great, Dan. I usually wrap up these episodes with a golden nugget. So one piece of information that you will share with the audience that's high or significant value. So that could be the best lesson, bit of advice you got, or what you have for anyone that you think would be listening to this podcast.
Look, I gave a talk a little while ago to a group of agents in Brisbane, and Wayne Bennett spoke after me. And
wow.
I wanted to listen to what he said, and he said something like, his advice was, all I demand out of my players is they give me their best. And he said, do you demand that of yourself? Right? And I was like, you know what? No, there's some days where I haven't given my best. And he's like, I'll tell my players, I'll have you back. Like, I'll be the most loyal bloke of all time. You got to give me your best every day. That's it. I want your best. And I understand you'll have good and bad days. But if you consistently try your best, that's all I can ask you. So I think that really resonated with me. I've started telling my children that, just do your best in that exam. Dull. I got 3 daughters. Yeah. Just do your best. Right? If you haven't done your best, well, that's not good enough. Then I'll be upset, and you should be upset at yourself. But if you do your best in life, that is all you can do. And I really like that.
That probably leads into it's a great way to raise the girls, and I think it's a good way as well for you to lead your team. But also need to ask you, and what we generally end on is Daniel O'Brien from X Commercial. What is a quote that you live your life by?
The quote I live by is just do your best every day.
Do your best. Show up.
Show up, 100%. Put in, and do your best every day.
Just on that, I feel like real estate agents, I don't know if it's the same as commercial, but you need to be on a lot. You need to be on your game, looking good, feeling good, on the phones, talking to people. How do you sort of stay at that level and not get burnt out?
Because it's only 5 days a week in commercial. So I go and have a 2-day weekend. Well, that really helps.
Really?
Yep.
That's the secret.
That's it. I jokingly say I haven't worked a Friday afternoon for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm not doing this,
pub after this, hey? Yeah.
No, I'm either that or I'm picking the girls up from school. So, it's really good. 2:00 Friday, that's it.
Okay.
You can still reach me on the phone, but I'm not in the office. So that's a really easy way to beat burnout. And I have all of January off and have 3 weeks in July. Holidays.
Okay, everyone's shut down.
Business. Offices shut from
what
the 20th.
What about July?
Yeah, July, we'll take the kids away on holidays.
Okay.
For 2 or 3 weeks.
Office is shut, 20th to...
20th of December to the 15th of Jan, every year.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's
it's interesting.
You don't burn out.
Yeah, but that's it's almost like the toxic part of the industry. Or I see people like, yeah, I'm on 24/7. Call me whenever you want.
7 days a week. Yeah.
I'm like, there's only so long that can last, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Do you reckon that's come with a bit of age and experience?
Oh, absolutely.
Were you like that as a young agent?
No. I always worked hard.
Even CBRE days? You
Yeah,
were working
definitely.
5 days a week then?
Yeah.
Or 6?
No, 5.
Wow.
Always 5.
Commercial.
Not 4.5 like I am now, but
okay.
I was always 5. For the first 10 years, you got to hustle. So I'm not advocating that young agents work 4.5 days a week. I'm not saying that.
Yep.
You got to put in, and you got to be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or longer.
Every single day.
Or do whatever it takes. It's the best job in the world.
Well, look, Dan O'Brien from X Commercial, appreciate you having on the Everything Property podcast.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for inviting me.
Done too easy, mate.